On July 4, 2025, President Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, eliminating the $200 tax on suppressors and short-barreled rifles, a seismic shift for gun owners nationwide. This historic legislation marks a significant change in the landscape of American gun laws, reflecting a growing movement to reduce restrictions on firearm accessories. This move dismantles a financial barrier that stood for nearly a century, with supporters hailing it as a restoration of constitutional rights. They argue that the tax was an unnecessary burden on law-abiding citizens who simply want to exercise their Second Amendment rights without excessive government interference. The law removes these items from the most restrictive parts of the National Firearms Act, though background checks and registration remain for now. This means that while the financial burden is lifted, the government still maintains some oversight to ensure public safety. For decades, the tax and slow approval process were seen as unfair obstacles for law-abiding citizens. Many felt that the system was designed to discourage ownership of these items rather than regulate them fairly. Supporters expect a surge in legal ownership, citing benefits like hearing protection and improved firearm handling. They believe that more accessible suppressors will lead to safer shooting environments and better training opportunities for gun owners. However, gun control advocates warn this could make it easier for dangerous individuals to access more concealable weapons. They fear that the removal of the tax will lead to an increase in the misuse of these firearms. They argue the original tax was a public safety measure, and its repeal could undermine decades of gun control. The tax was initially implemented to curb the use of these weapons in criminal activities during a turbulent period in American history. The stage is set for a renewed, heated debate over America's gun laws. As both sides prepare for the next battle, the nation watches closely to see how this landmark decision will shape the future of gun ownership in the United States. To understand the impact of this law, let's clarify what suppressors and short-barreled rifles, SBRs, really are. Suppressors, often misnamed silencers, don't make guns silent. They reduce noise to safer levels, protecting hearing but still producing loud gunshots. SBRs are rifles, with barrels under 16 inches, prized for their compactness and maneuverability, especially in home defense. Contrary to popular belief, shorter barrels don't make rifles more powerful, they actually reduce range and velocity. Proponents argue these items improve safety and usability, while critics worry about increased concealability and criminal misuse. Suppressors are seen as safety devices in many countries, but in the US, their deregulation sparks fears about law enforcement's ability to respond to shootings. The debate centers on balancing practical benefits for lawful owners against potential risks if these items fall into the wrong hands. The National Firearms Act of 1934 was born from the violence of the Prohibition era, targeting weapons associated with gangsters. Instead of outright bans, the NFA imposed a $200 tax, then a huge sum, to restrict access to machine guns, SBRs, and suppressors. The law also required federal registration and extensive background checks, creating a national registry that remains controversial. Over time, the tax became less prohibitive, but the bureaucratic hurdles persisted, frustrating gun owners for decades. Courts upheld the NFA as a tax measure, not a direct Second Amendment violation, allowing it to survive for nearly a century. Critics argue the NFA is outdated, punishing law-abiding citizens for crimes of a bygone era. They point out that NFA-regulated items are rarely used in crimes, and most owners are enthusiasts or collectors. The recent repeal of the tax reflects a belief that the NFA is an unnecessary burden, setting the stage for today's legislative changes. The repeal of the NFA tax was the result of years of persistent advocacy and grassroots mobilization, gaining significant momentum with the election of a Republican-controlled Congress and President Trump in 2025. This shift in political power created a unique window of opportunity for gun rights supporters who had long argued that the NFA's restrictions were outdated and unfair. Congressman Andrew Clyde emerged as a leading voice, spearheading efforts to combine the Hearing Protection Act and the SHORT Act into what became known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. His coalition building and relentless campaigning helped unify various pro-gun groups behind a single legislative push. The bill's primary goal was to remove suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the NFA's list of regulated items, framing the move as a necessary defense of constitutional freedoms and individual rights. Supporters argued that these changes would restore liberties that had been eroded over decades. The legislation advanced rapidly through Congress, propelled by widespread backlash against previous executive actions, such as the controversial 2023 pistol brace rule. Lawmakers faced intense debate, but public pressure kept the issue at the forefront. Supporters viewed the bill as a crucial step to prevent future government overreach and to protect gun owners from sudden, sweeping regulatory changes. Many believed it would provide much-needed clarity and stability for law-abiding citizens. Despite fierce and passionate opposition from Democrats who raised concerns about public safety and gun violence, the bill ultimately passed largely along party lines after heated debate. On July 4th, in a symbolic gesture, President Trump signed the act into law, calling it a historic victory for freedom and the Second Amendment. The signing ceremony was met with celebration from supporters across the country. The signing marked the end of a long and contentious legislative battle, ushering in a new era for gun regulation and setting a precedent for future reforms. The law's passage stands as a turning point in the national conversation about firearms, sparking renewed debate and reflection on the balance between regulation and individual rights. Supporters of the repeal argue it restores constitutional rights and promotes public health by making suppressors more accessible for hearing protection. They dismiss the idea that suppressors make guns silent, emphasizing that suppressed gunshots remain loud and easily identifiable. For SBRs, they argue the regulations were arbitrary, criminalizing cosmetic features rather than addressing real safety concerns. Opponents, however, warn that deregulation threatens public safety, making it easier for criminals to obtain and conceal dangerous weapons. They argue the NFA tax worked for decades to keep particularly risky firearms off the streets. Gun control groups fear the change will lead to more SBRs and suppressors in circulation, increasing the risk of gun violence. The debate highlights a fundamental divide: individual rights versus collective safety. Both sides see the law as a defining moment in America's ongoing struggle over gun policy. The bill's passage was driven by relentless advocacy from both gun rights and gun control groups. The NRA and Gun Owners of America lobbied lawmakers, mobilized members, and framed the NFA tax as an infringement on liberty. GOA's Eric Pratt and Sam Paredes provided legal and political support, working closely with lawmakers to draft the legislation. On the other side, groups like Giffords, Brady, and Everytown mounted fierce opposition, warning the law would endanger public safety. They organized campaigns, ran ads, and brought forward survivors and law enforcement voices to highlight the risks. Despite their efforts, the bill passed, but their arguments remain central to ongoing legal and political battles. The advocacy on both sides ensured the debate was intense and far-reaching. The fight over gun regulation is far from over, with both camps preparing for the next phase. With the law signed, the fight shifted from Congress to the courts. Gun Owners of America quickly filed the One Big Beautiful lawsuit, aiming to dismantle the entire NFA by arguing its constitutional basis vanished with the tax. If successful, suppressors and SBRs could be regulated like standard firearms, requiring only a basic background check. Gun control groups are preparing their own lawsuits, arguing the repeal threatens public safety and that core NFA regulations should remain. The legal landscape is complicated by other major Second Amendment cases heading to the Supreme Court. The court's conservative majority could reshape gun regulation for generations. The outcome of these legal battles will determine the future of federal firearms laws. The stakes have never been higher for both gun rights and gun control advocates. The repeal of the NFA tax marks a major shift in American gun policy, with immediate effects for gun owners and far-reaching consequences for the nation. This decision is not just a legislative change, it's a signal that the country is re-examining its approach to firearms, personal freedoms, and public safety. The move has sparked passionate reactions from both supporters and critics, setting the stage for a new era in the ongoing debate over gun rights. Legal ownership of suppressors and SBRs is expected to rise, normalizing their use for hearing protection and home defense. For many, these devices will become a routine part of responsible gun ownership, offering practical benefits that were once out of reach for the average citizen. This normalization could also influence how firearms are perceived in American culture, potentially reducing stigma and changing the conversation around gun safety. However, the legal battles ahead could lead to further deregulation, or new restrictions at the state level, creating a patchwork of laws. Some states may embrace the changes, while others could push back with stricter regulations, leading to confusion and challenges for gun owners who travel or move between states. The courts will likely play a crucial role in determining how these laws are interpreted and enforced. Gun control advocates will closely monitor crime rates, ready to link any increase to the new law. They argue that loosening restrictions could make it easier for dangerous individuals to access firearms, and they are prepared to use any uptick in gun-related incidents as evidence in their fight for tighter controls. Their vigilance ensures that the debate remains highly visible in the public eye. The debate over public safety versus individual rights will only intensify, keeping gun policy at the center of American politics. Lawmakers, activists, and everyday citizens will continue to voice their opinions, making firearms legislation a defining issue in upcoming elections and public discourse. The current administration's actions reflect a broader cultural shift toward expanding Second Amendment rights. This shift is not just about policy, but about the values and identity of the nation, as Americans grapple with the balance between tradition, safety, and freedom. States may respond with their own regulations, fueling more legal and political clashes. The resulting landscape will be shaped by local values, political pressures, and the ongoing tug-of-war between state and federal authority. The long-term impact on safety and liberty remains uncertain. Only time will reveal whether these changes will lead to a safer society, or if new risks will emerge as a result of expanded access to firearms. As the nation watches, the next chapter in America's complex relationship with firearms is just beginning. The choices made today will echo for generations, shaping the future of freedom, security, and the American way of life.